Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark, and today we have an editor who's going to join us. And for those of you who are thinking about or writing a book, an editor is an essential part of this. And it's the part that people probably try to skip the most, and it really does impact the quality of your book. But before we get started, I want to remind you about Breakthrough Author Magazine. You can find it at breakthroughauthormagazine.com. We have a lot of new contributors this year. We're adding trainings, we're adding events inside. And that's in addition to all of those tips and tricks as well. So go over, get your free subscription, no obligation. It's free. It just drops into your inbox every month. You can either connect with us at that website and opt in and have it delivered in your email box, or go follow us over on LinkedIn, where we have a huge following that's subscribed over there, and it'll just be dropped into your newsletter place every month. So today's guest is Amber Parr Burdett, and she is an accomplished editor, author, writing strategy coach with over 6 years of professional experience in editorial and educational fields. She has empowered more than 350 authors across 13 countries to shape, write, refine, and elevate their messages through her expert guidance, ensuring proactive support and message clarity. Amber's industry expertise spans editing, ghostwriting, manuscript development, and curriculum analysis and creation, where she has crafted editorial flows, style guides, and instructional best practices for a range of clients, from writing and publishing to startup and educational organizations. And you're probably like, well, why is this important about the course? As many of you guys know, books don't usually yield ROI. It's what you do next. So it is really important that you understand the structure of that course you're offering next. So stay tuned for Amber. Amber, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited for you guys that don't know. I met Amber. She's a Utah person. So I had to have her on since I am now a resident of Utah and have been for the last 8 years. So tell us, how did you get into this? Like, where did this career come from? Because I know for most people, this is not their first career.
Oh no. I think like most people, I had that desire when I was younger to create and to, do something and write a book. And then naturally, as you get older, a lot of people are like, oh, be realistic. Come on, do something that makes sense. So when I went to school to get an English degree, everyone was like, okay, like, what are you going to do with that? And I was very much like, I'm going to the professional writing. I'm going to be a professional copywriter. I work for online universities. I did that for a long time and kind of like freelanced and helped authors on the side. And then I was like, no, like I can make a living out of this. So I just went, I still work part-time for an online university as their senior managing copy editor, Sophia Learning. But most of the bulk of my work is with authors and helping publishing companies establish themselves, grow, scale, define who their target readers are, all of the above. So I don't know, it was that innate desire to create and to help authors get their messages out there.
Yeah, that is so funny. That's kind of how I got into it as well. Just kind of, it's weird because you have a path, and then your path kind of goes off course, but it comes back. And then when you look back, you say, oh, well, that's because it went off course because everything that I wanted to do, I needed all this experience that I didn't realize I needed. So
Yes.
yeah, it's kind of in that way. Like if I looked back when I was your age, I'd be like, what the heck am I doing? Like I had a dream and I'm nowhere near it.
I still feel like that all the time. I'm like, I am not living my 5-year plan. Like, oh, 5-year plan has evolved.
Right? But when I look back now, like every step along the way I needed, even though I didn't know at the time that, I would need that accounting experience from college, and I would need that, I just, as I skipped through it, everything was putting pieces in place to
Yeah.
do this thing. Yeah.
And
So
all the online education things that I've worked for, like they really have honed my skill set because a lot of the books I work with are the nonfiction, professional development, business books. And so those authors are more of the refined language, not as like the creative flow. So that's where I get to like merge my experience with the technical side with my creative side of like, hey, here's how we can incorporate your story into words.
Yes, and that was one of my questions here is you mentioned in an article that you wrote about what process do you use to convert abstract concepts into relatable personal stories in nonfiction? And that is really hard when you work with spiritual people because you're
Mhm.
taking something so esoteric and making it tangible.
Yeah.
So, how do you do that?
I, everything that I do is very, very focused on your reader and very, very focused on those personal relationships. And so when I'm working with authors, if there's something I don't understand, we'll either meet or I'll say, if you are talking to your one reader, that one person who needs to hear your message, not overthinking how you're going to write it, because we do that as writers when we're sitting and staring
Yes.
at the words. But if you're just talking to me, what are you trying to say? And even if they fumble over their words, typically that message is crystal clear. And then it's really easy to say, okay, now let's take your story. Like, let's take that idea that they won't understand because they don't have that experience and mesh it with your experience to give it foundation and ground that reader in what that idea means and what it can mean for their life. So it's really just getting them talking and opening up and not thinking, I am an author. I have to be rigid. I have to be formal. Because a
Hmm.
lot of the time, it's more of like a word vomit draft. And excuse me for saying vomit, but like it really is. It's just like get it out there, just let it flow. And when you're in your flow state, you're unstoppable.
Well, yeah, I am not going. Don't apologize for vomit because I actually call it the vomit draft because I
Yes.
speak to so many people who say, "Oh, I've been writing a book for 5 years," and I have to ask, like, "Where are you at in it?" "Oh, I'm still rewriting chapter one." Like, your book will never get out if you don't do
Yeah.
that. And I think vomit draft is a really good tag for it
Yeah.
because nearly every editor I speak to calls it that because it really is just going in the flow. And I'm going to give you guys an example. When I was writing fiction novels, I would sit down and there'd be days where I'd have a little block. There'd be days when I would crank out 4,000 or 5,000 words. And I'd think, oh my God, I'm a writing genius. And then I would go back and see it later, like go back to my rewrites. And there would be such just stupid things like pair, Pair, would be spelled Pear. But the point was that I got it out. It wasn't
Mhm.
brilliant, but that's what the rewrites are for.
Yeah, that and also so many writers think like, okay, I have to have this perfect space. Like we have to go into the cabin in the woods next to the perfect lake so that way we can really get our words out. And it's like, no. A lot of the times it comes when you're like just allowing yourself to have creative moments throughout your day to day. Mine's sitting in the car driving.
Mhm.
Typically my little one's listening to whatever music she's listening to, but I'm like staring at the road. It's very therapeutic and like ideas and thoughts start coming to me. And I've seen that with all the writers. Like it's not sitting in your own space and having the perfect writing setting with the perfect images around you. It's just getting out and being you and letting your ideas flow because that doesn't work for everyone. And it does work for some, but not most people.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I get inspiration from driving, just being alone, like on a road trip. I love to drive because I do get so much out, or even walking. Like if I get stuck, I'll go for a walk. Just that
Mhm.
being in nature sometimes will
Yeah.
help get those creative juices going. So no, I think a lot of people do that. But there's that other part because you help fiction authors too, where when I used to write fiction, I would go down to this mall in Calabasas. It's an outdoor mall, and just kind of watch people and their mannerisms and their behaviors, I think can sometimes stimulate a lot of what's going on too. Like, oh, look how quirky that guy is. That's going in a story.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, all the time. And you do have to like use inspiration around you. But even with fiction writers, you still have to have a very clear message and a very clear goal with your book. And a lot of fiction writers refuse to believe that. But
Yes,
it's
yes.
so true. Like where are you leading the reader? Even if it's an emotional state, you want to have that transformation. And if you don't have some sort of like clear, here's where they're starting, here's where they're ending, here's who I'm writing to, it's so easy to get trapped in your head and say, I don't know what scene's next. I don't know what to write next because you're in your head and you're not thinking about what does the reader need? What is going to get them from point A to point B?
That is very true. And with fiction too, I have to say, I'm listening to Jonathan Kellerman's latest book right now, just came out, and I'm always shocked that he got like a deal and has so many books because his writing, like it feels sometimes like there's too much dialogue and the show versus tell is missing. And I
Mhm.
think that is That is truly, I think, the hardest part. I mean, I even struggle with it today, and I've written a lot of books. So, can you elaborate on that? Like, are there exercises you can do to overcome that show versus tell?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, oh, there are so many. I think the one that comes to mind right now is go out and imagine like what you're doing as whatever the scene is. So, for instance, if you are talking about two people who are drinking a cup of coffee, go to a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Like, watch how they interact. If you're talking about some fantasy, there's still some sort of interaction that triggered your mind to think about that fantasy. So you have to like look at it and then truly just try to like visualize what's happening. You're not saying she took a sip of coffee. You're putting them in that situation so they can imagine it and trigger those memories. You can smell the coffee beans as you go into that Starbucks. And that like for me triggers books. And so it's whatever you want to trigger that feeling, that emotion. It's not about a scene. It's not about what's happening. It's focusing on how you want that reader to feel in that moment. Why is that scene important? And all of it goes down to how many words are important. If it's not important to the reader, why are you even including it in the book? And maybe that scene needs to be cut.
Right. That's so true. It's like when you're talking to someone who goes off. I don't know if you've ever done it. They go off on these big tangents and you're like, whoa, whoa. I used to, my ex-husband all the time, give birth. Like, just get to the end.
Yes.
Like
What
you
is
can't,
the point?
yeah,
And we
you
don't mean
can't.
to be, but we are selfish. And like committing to reading a book is a lot of time. Like if I'm
Yeah.
committing to reading your book, I'm investing time and energy in your book. And so if your book is going on tangents, I really don't have time for that. Like I have a family, I have work. I don't, so if you're really thinking, okay, what is the emotion I'm evoking with this scene? Every 500 words, if you've gone back and seen like you haven't really had a purpose for the reader, you're really not thinking about the reader, you're thinking about yourself. And it will be a lot cheaper and a lot more therapeutic to just go write in your journal and have that as a hobby. Don't be an author if you're not willing to think about who this book is for.
Yes, exactly. And when you come back to that scene too, when I would be in that mall, I would take pictures too, so that I could put them on the
Idea.
wall. And how do I describe this? Because you may not, like, you may have a feeling at the time, but by the time you sit down and write, that feeling's probably gone. But if you have those
Yeah.
pictures, you can kind of go back and evoke, like, how did I feel there? And what was the scenery
And you
that
you
was
do
painted?
have to find out what works for you. Pictures work for you. What works for me is my notes app. My notes app, I have hundreds of notes in there. Most of them I'll probably never touch. But because like, hey, I want to make sure I remember this feeling. So what was said, and not only what was said, because as you revisit it, you will not have that exact same feeling before, writing a little bit about what it meant to you. So then you can trigger that experience. Because how many times have we written down a quote thinking, that's amazing? And we come back to it when we're angry or in a different stressed mood and we're like, that means nothing to me right now.
That is very true. Um, when it comes to platform building, I feel like that reader avatar is something that people don't consider. I don't know how many times I've heard, and I'm going to give you guys an example you probably heard before. People bring me happiness books, books on how to be happy all the time. And they assume that, or they'll actually say to me, like, well, everybody wants to be happy. And they don't understand that there are people that being unhappy serves them in some way, and they're not going to pay attention to your book. So how do you narrow down that avatar and then find those people
Yeah.
to connect with, to get that message out for the platform you're building for the book?
So, something that I do, I also do author coaching, and one of the key components is alignment guiding. So I'm a certified alignment guide. But what that means is you have a crystal clear picture of who your reader is based on the feeling and the emotion and the vision you have for your book, the goal you have for the book, and making sure it's a reciprocal relationship between your reader and yourself, that it's serving your purpose and not just everybody. What I like to do is because traditionally avatars and ideal readers or ideal people that we're marketing to are a range of wit, like a woman ranges 24 to 37. But that doesn't work. That really doesn't work in today's market. A 37-year-old woman with two kids is going to be completely different than the 24-year-old who just recently got married or isn't even thinking about marriage and wants to conquer the world. Completely different people. So when you are going super specific into who is that one person, what are their needs? Not just, oh, this age. It's what are their needs? Who are they as an individual? You're thinking, are they adventurous? And there's questions you can ask yourself. So they become that person and they're your best friend. My best friend is my avatar. Her name is Rachel. She is a 31-year-old woman with two
Mhm.
kids. And like I know her intimately. So anything I write, marketing, anything I write for my book or for business is towards her because I'm speaking to her. And there are different stages of my avatar when she's in her new mother stage, which when she's in her stage of, hey, like I'm ready to write my own book, but it's still that same person.
Yeah, no, I love that. When I first started out, I was having trouble closing deals. And
Hmm.
because I wasn't really specific. And I took my avatar, mine's Kathy, and I took them, and you guys, you can all do this. You don't need a boardwalk. I went down to Santa Monica
Oh,
and I
yeah.
said, draw Kathy, and they drew this great cartoon of, what do you call those things? Caricatures?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the big head, but Kathy had all of these things that she was. And so that sat on my wall. And I used to tick, just like you used to say.
Mhm.
When I was on a call, I would tick down, like, is this Kathy? Is this Kathy? And if it wasn't Kathy, I wouldn't make an offer.
Yeah. And everything you do leading up to the point where you can make the offer should still be for Kathy, should still be for your ideal reader. And I sometimes hate saying avatar because it's like this abstract idea, kind of like what we
Right.
were talking about before. But your person, every marketing tactic, every website copy, if it's not directed towards your one reader, you're going to get people who do not align with what you're trying to offer. But if along the way, you're going to attract those people because your words will be so sticky because they'll feel like she's talking to me. Like she knows me and I feel like she's calling my soul and they feel drawn to you. And then they go to your website. And again, you've hit their pain points. You've answered all their questions. You're giving extreme value. And like, I do need her book. And they read her book. And it's like, okay, where does this book lead me next? I need more of this author. I need more of everybody, everything that she can have to give me because you have talked to one person instead of everybody needs love. No, the 24-year-old thinks love is like, I need to get married. The 37-year-old is, I want my child's love. Like, why don't they love me right now?
Right.
Find your
Um,
person.
you know what's interesting about that too is obviously that's the first step, but then between the time you're writing the book, you need to build that audience. So that's where you can take your Kathy or Rachel or whoever it is, and then start testing that avatar. And I
Mhm.
think there are so many pieces that authors forget that should happen in between that book, the idea of the book and the book to building that audience, because so many people think that I'm just going to put it up and everybody will love it.
Oh
And
yeah.
you have to cultivate that audience in advance. And you're actually, and you'll know this from marketing, you're validating your marketing finds
Hmm.
before the book is even written. So you're
Hmm.
validating that somebody actually needs this book.
Yes. And this is why you have to figure out what works for you, your cadence, your people, because you don't have to do the posting 3 times a day or even every day. It's starting with the commitment that you can commit to. For one of my authors, it literally was once a month. That was her goal. And as we worked through the book, she was like, okay, like I feel more creative. I'm like, okay, use those creative juices, especially in the editing stage, especially as you're reviewing, to talk to your person. That is when you're like, okay, instead of once a month, let's do once a week. It's a natural, gradual increase. It's not, I'm going all for it. I'm posting every day. I'm going to tell everybody, oh, this book is really hard today. I don't really want to. It's what works for me, and I'm going to work ahead and I'm going to commit.
Yeah, that is. We actually start our clients with 3 times a week, and they have to create their first month's content calendar. So
Oh,
we're trying to
that's a
get
big
them
one.
into the habit of I have a calendar and it's
Mhm.
always a month or two ahead. Because the other thing is they don't take into consideration if something happens. You have a sick child and you can't work for a week.
Oh, yeah.
Now what you're doing can't stop, but if you're ahead, then you have that ability to go ahead and do it.
Mhm.
Um, and the reason I talk about the platform so much is people just jump in with the book and then they have to go back
Mhm.
and do all of this. We see that a lot. And when
Mhm.
you're at the point where you're writing that book, it's like publish your course, your moneymaker, because most people don't make that money. off the book. So you
Right.
not only have that book ready, but you have to have that second step that you and I have talked about with the
Mhm.
courses. That has to be ready too. So you can move from the book is nurturing. Now here's my big ticket.
Oh yeah, and there are so many tactics, and they're not tactics in a bad way, because sometimes we put a bad connotation to that. There are so many amazing opportunities you have if you're growing your platform along the way, but it is starting somewhere. Because a lot of the times I get the authors who haven't yet found their publisher. And of course, you can work backwards. It's harder, but it's starting somewhere because
Yeah.
most people are overwhelmed thinking, I have to get 3 months ahead, and what the heck is a content calendar?
Yeah.
Just
That that's
start.
that's why we do one-on-one coaching for that kind of stuff because it,
It's
it is like motivational and here it is. And the nice thing is there's so many great AI tools now
mhm.
that that calendar can become really easy. We actually teach a whole course on it. What to use, get the content out there, and then how to break that content down. And once you learn how to break it down, it's not hard. I think authors go into it with the idea that everything has to start from scratch and they keep reinventing the wheel instead of using tools that will do that for them
Right.
on
And
there.
they also don't realize you're probably at times going to be bored of your message. You
Oh,
really
yeah.
are. If you're talking about it so much. Like, hopefully it's something you're passionate about, but there might be days where you're like, oh, I'm not in my flow state. Like, I'm kind of bored of this. But those people who are coming to your platform for the first time that just barely met you on social media have no idea what you talked about 2 years ago. And they're not
Right.
going to scroll through your entire social media just to find what you talked about 2 years ago. That's the hope. But if you keep talking about the same themes and those feelings and those core values that you have, that's what resonates. And it can be a little repetitious, but that's when it's like, okay, take a minute, work ahead. You're 2 months ahead. Don't touch it for a little bit and come back when you do feel like you're in that creative flow again.
Yeah. Yeah, that is. And people don't realize too, and you know this from being an editor, most of the time you're sick of your own book by the time you publish it. Like
Yes.
I wrote several fiction novels very quickly, and I would like one would be published, I'd be publicizing the second one and writing the third one, and I'd be like, really, we're going to talk about that? I don't even
It's
remember what happened
hard.
in that book.
Yeah. And that's the business behind it. And even as an editor, so I just finished an edit with a woman and we did a full scale edit. Like I'm talking book doctoring, then making sure the development was there, then the copy edits, and then like the proofread before it was sent to the publisher. I personally read that book 6 times
Yeah.
by the time it was done. That's what's normal. So that's why you have to make sure like what you're talking about resonates with your soul and you're not just doing it as a money grab. Because if you're going to have a quality book and invest all that money into good editing and quality cover, you're going to have talked about that message so much that you will be sick of it.
Well, and then add to it, you're someone who helps people create courses as well. Think
Mhm.
about now you're drawing that book that you're sick of into a course that you're going to have to give probably
Yeah.
over and over unless it's something evergreen. So you're going to have to stay with those ideas and expand on them because that second step is usually your moneymaker, not
Mhm.
the first step where you're talking about the book. So you have a gift for us today. Tell us a little bit about it. You guys will find the URL down in the show notes, but I love this gift because many of you don't build this and you really should because you actually talked about not just demographics but psychographics there. And I feel like a lot of people miss the psychographics when they're building that avatar.
I completely agree with you, which is why I'm so excited. Like it's something I'm so passionate about, finding your ideal reader. So I have a guide. It's really like a questionnaire type thing that asks you prompting questions about who your ideal reader is, like how to define them, as well as that psychographic, like who they are as a person at their core. So you can know them intimately. And it makes you get specific. So if you're coming in thinking, oh, I'll just put the range of 24 to 37, it's not going to work here. I want you after this guide to like fill it out so you can look at that and completely know who your reader is. And
Yeah.
that's what the guide is. I didn't
Yeah.
really describe that well, but it's to get you to know who your ideal reader is.
Yeah, and you guys, I want you to really take this at heart. Again, download it when we get it into the show notes. This will not only help you define your reader, if you're a nonfiction author who's developing courses and you have, you're building your platform, this is going to help you get more specific with that. And the more specific you are with the business, the more business you're going to get.
Mhm.
So I think that's kind of it's almost that marketing research that authors
Yeah.
don't do well. That when I was in advertising, we did really deep dives with it. So
Mhm. This will bring up those pain points for the readers. And so, like, you really will not only know their pain points, but you will know, like, your words will become sticky because you will be able to address them on a personal level. So, like Juliet was saying, like, it's everything. Like, this will help you completely open up your business and expand.
yeah, it definitely will. Amber, thank you.
Thank you so much.